Hello, this is Donald Wade Davis, and I'm with the Coalition of Historical Trekkers, or the COHT. We've had a lot of requests since we posted our first video to do a trekking video, and we're fortunate today that we have our president, Mr. Todd Wells, who recently was on a trek way up north near the Canadian border, a wintertime trek, is here with us. He has brought his trekking gear, and we are going to go through the list of what his gear is. The trouble is, it's been unseasonably warm here in the States. Normally our weather this time of year, it's the 22nd and 23rd of February, and our weather here is about freezing or a little warmer, and we've had days now here up to 65. We're in eastern Nebraska at Fort Atkinson. For those of you that are our Canadian brothers, our weather is normally around 0, and it has been up around 16, 17 degrees Celsius. So you know it's been warm. So anyway, without any further ado, I'd like to welcome you, Todd. How are you?
Great. Thanks, Wade.
Okay. I saw on our Facebook page that you had took a trip up to, is it Pembina?
Pembina.
Yeah. Which is near the confluence of the Red River. How far from the Canadian border were you?
We were about 1.5 miles south of the border. The confluence there is the Red and the Pembina. And the site we were at was the fur trade post of Alexander Henry the Younger. And he had that post for nearly 10 years there in that one spot.
What were the years he was there by chance?
I think it was around 1801 up through 1807 or 8. Might be pretty close.
Okay. And how many were in the party?
There were 8 of us. There were coalition members from Montana, North Dakota, and then 2 of us from South Dakota.
Okay. And we get a lot of requests, as I said, for gear. I know wintertime is probably the most difficult to trek in, with local conditions oftentimes being snow and cold and freezing. Yeah. Did you bring some gear with you?
Well, I did, and I have to confess this was my first winter trek with primitive shelter. Mm-hmm. And so the organizer had all of us on this texting thread so that we could communicate back and forth, which was very helpful. And so we kind of knew what each other was going to bring, but there were some things that I learned, even just as my first one, that could make things better or easier, and I just wanted to share that with our members and whoever else might be watching our video.
Yes, I know we visited a little earlier, and one of the things you said was you wished that an effort had been made to assign some of the larger items of gear so there was no duplication in the party. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Well, it's not just duplication of the party, but burden of the party. You know, I know in a lot of the trekking information that you see that a lot of people that do this, whether they're coalition members or not, are always talking about weight. And they're weighing literally everything that they take. And I understand that concept, but to me sometimes it's not about the actual weight of the thing, but your ability to be the burden of it, to carry it. So light is easier, especially if you're going a far distance. The great thing about wintertime is you can use a sled. Mm-hmm. And I constructed a sled, as did Ben that rode up together. And they worked really well, and we waxed the runners on them, so that helped a lot. Had a lot of weight on there, and I started thinking about, is this too much weight? But we ended up having kind of what we needed. To further answer your question, you know, if you're going to be in a group of people, how many things do you need to have? And how many of those things do you need to have? Like, do you need more than one hammer for driving stakes? Do you need more than one saw for firewood? Do you need more than one axe? You know, a lot of us has been doing interpretive history for years and years, and we all like our stuff. And when we get together with other guys, we like to have our stuff out there. It's kind of a inside thing, you know, a little bit of pride about what you have. But when it comes to going on a trek, especially a group trek, one has to think about the group as a total. And so not worry about what you have, but what you can contribute, and how can you do that the most efficiently.
Yes, I know a lot of people are independent. They've been out trekking. They pitch their own camp. They set their own gear. They cook their own meals. And I know my own experience from going on group treks is it helps to work in the cooperative, whereas, for instance, everybody helps pitch the camps, and then everybody helps with the meals. Everybody shares bringing items of food, and that's all pre-decided upon, so there's no confusion. And it also means that you're carrying less gear. You don't show up with 4 full axes. You show up with the 1 axe that's needed. You don't show up with 9 hammers, 1 nice hammer to drive in. Everybody doesn't bring 8 stakes. You've got enough stakes. So we have to change our mindset, and I think you're right, to work together. And I know in the 18th century, from reports that I've read, people actually did do that. When they were out on what we would term today a trek, they were out for a purpose. They were either on a scout, they were a small military group going on a maneuver, they were an express carrying a message. So they had a purpose, they went as light as they could, and they worked together.
Yeah, and of course what we're doing today is a more modernated version of that, and not necessarily did they actually get together and just go for a walk to learn something. You're absolutely right, they had a purpose. But what we refer to as trekking today is, in a way, kind of a recreation or recreation of that activity. So we can pretend, we can have literally set ourselves a goal that this is where we're going and this is why, and fold that into the actual activity. Mm-hmm. And so, and although most of the treks that the coalition does, or perhaps all of them, are on foot, you know, in those days, as you well know, that horseback was far more common than just walking on foot, depending on how far you're going and what your purpose was.
Yeah, most of the reading that I've done of primary 18th and 19th century resources, a man on foot wouldn't venture any farther than 5 to 10 miles from the stationary post. Any distance generally required horses, pack horses, and lots of stuff. I did a paper recently about the fur trade era, the mountain men era in the Rocky Mountain West. And I went to about 20 primary resources, first-person accounts, and it was rendered and figured that the average mountain man, the trapper in the wilds, not counting his food, had between 250 to 400 pounds of personal gear. Yeah. So they traveled a lot heavier than what we're thinking, but they had a beast of burden. They were in a boat, a canoe, or they were on horseback.
Right. And not only that, but they were probably had several more horses just to carry the furs that they were going to end up packing out in the end. Yeah. So I think that when we look at our modern day treks, we try to do them as primitively as we can. We try, and the Coalition of Historical Trekkers really works hard at doing things the right way, as you well know. And so we try to have all of the proper equipment and use it the most efficiently. But it can put a lot of extra fun into a trek that can be enhanced by having a make-up goal, if you want, or a purpose. And because really, trekking today, from my viewpoint, is there are really 2 goals. One is to learn something. You know, either from where you're going, the place where you're going might be unknown to you, or from the other members of the group, should you have a larger group. The second thing is to have fun. I mean, And if you're not enjoying yourself
Yes.
and you're not comfortable, it can stop you from learning.
Yes.
And that's really where a winter trek can be a real teaching experience. It's cold out. It wasn't terribly cold. We had nights down around 13 or 14 Fahrenheit and as high as 30 degrees Fahrenheit during the daytime. The fire always felt pretty good. But, you know, you have to sleep comfortably, and you have to be able to have clothing that keeps you warm, because if you're not happy, nobody's going to be happy.
Right, right. So in answer to our viewers' requests, we're going to kind of go down the list of what you took. You said you started with a sled, so tell us a little bit about that.
Well, my traveling companion, Ben, also a coalition member, came up with a pattern that has some historical background. He found it somewhere online, perhaps, and it was really simple. I mean, once you have the materials laying on the workbench, it was really maybe half an hour of assembly. It was simple cuts, a few holes, and nailing the boards onto the deck of the two runners.
Okay, and I know you had told me before in various treks and events that we've been on that you could never have too long a rope.
No, rope is so useful. And important on when you think about weight or when you think about extra stuff being along, a single rope can be used for so many things. You know, I found on this particular trek that I had taken rope just specifically for staking out the diamond fly. I had plenty of other rope I could have used. I could have used, for example, I bundled all of my gear on top of the sled with a piece of canvas and a small rope to cinch that up at the top. And then I had a long rope that I could run through the holes on the sled, designated for such, and crisscross and bind it down to the sled so that it wouldn't move around. So there I have maybe 20 feet of rope. Mm-hmm. And why did I need the other ropes just for staking down the diamond? Because while you're there, you don't need them to tie down the bundle, but you do need rope over here. So that was really a conscious thing. I thought about it, and I said, you know, this is, I've got too much rope left.
So, Todd, you had said that to be aware of local conditions, and one of the things you said that in reference to was the pair of snowshoes you took.
Right. The organizer of the trek had said that we may not need sleds or snowshoes. And when we got there was enough snow on the ground so that the sled was very helpful. Mm-hmm. And however, there was not near enough snow on the ground to warrant having snowshoes, so they were baggage. Mm-hmm. You know, didn't need them. However, the one thing that I wished I didn't have that some of the other members did have was a set of ice cleats. And it's important to have some that will fit the footgear that you're going to be wearing. I was wearing an insulated pack moccasin, and they're wider, and so you have to have them so they fit that properly without cutting into the moccasin. And another point that one of the guys made was that you can have them, the spikes can be too long. And what he found out was that if he was standing on hard ground, for example, just standing around like in our camp, that the long spike would have started hurting his arch. And so he actually shortened up his spikes so they were still gripping when he was going up a slope or a hill, and would not be terribly uncomfortable just standing still.
Mm-hmm. And then we'll visit later on another video maybe about your clothing layering system, but key and integral to any winter type trek is a capote.
Yes, you have to have a good blanket coat, and of course, you know, layers underneath that, and that's what's important even today is layers of clothing. But a capote is really necessary. You've got to have that warm outer layer to protect yourself from the elements. And
then you had mentioned a shoe pack moccasin. Can you describe that to her?
Well, it's a larger than necessary for my foot on the outside with a sheepskin lining inside for insulation. And then to help protect the top of your foot from snow getting in there. These particular ones have two flaps of leather that roll around your leg, and then you lace it up high up to almost to your knee, and that helps protect, you know, your lower legs and your feet from getting wet.
Get snow inside the
It keeps the snow out.
Okay. And then I also know from my experience on winter treks is that your sleep system is very important. So tell us about your bedroll.
Well, it kind of goes back to my comment about if you're not comfortable and happy, you're not going to learn anything. So we ended up having, two of us shared a diamond shelter, and there was straw available, so we had that for some insulation, and we put a piece of heavier canvas on the floor of the diamond, and then a buffalo robe over that. So that's a pretty good start for some insulative factor. But it still was pretty chilly. So underneath my bedroll, I had a quilted cloth mat that helped. I'm not getting any younger, and sometimes having some place to put your hip is pretty helpful. Yeah. And over that was my bedroll, and then on top of that, I had 3 wool blankets. And that number of blankets seems excessive. It seems like maybe I shouldn't go out in the cold, but everybody there had multiple wool blankets, and they're very helpful. On top of that, I learned from a friend a long time ago, in cool, cold weather, nothing beats a piece of canvas over the top of all of it. It helps keep the moisture out and helps keep that heat radiating back in.
Indeed, I've learned that lesson too. A friend of mine named Craig Falwell, in fact, showed me that to put a piece of canvas over my blankets was the equivalent of adding a couple more blankets.
Yes, it really makes a difference.
And then you said you had taken a couple of diamond flies. Visit with us about that.
Well, and so this is where communication amongst the members, the ones that are going, of the members of the group, and what you think you can do. So initially 2 of us traveled together, and we each took a diamond. Well, when we got one set up, the point was made that really 2 of us will fit in there. And we did quite comfortably, even with all the extra bedding that we had for the weather and some of our gear. So the extra diamond was just extra baggage, not necessary.
All right. And then I noticed you also had a portmanteau along.
I did, and it's a fairly large one, and you've got to have a place for, you know, a dry pair of moccasins, dry socks, and when you're out away from home like that, you know, if you're on medication, you've got to have a place for that. And I had things in that portmanteau, which is a heavy leather piece of baggage, that I started thinking afterwards when I got home that, you know, had I just taken, I have a haversack knapsack combo, a 2-piece fold together, and everything that I had in that portmanteau would have fit in that haversack knapsack, and which I could have thrown on my back and lessened the load on the sled. And so you think, well, you've got a sled, everything has to go on the sled. No, it doesn't.
Okay. So, and then the last but not least is the tarp. And I would like you to visit on that. You said you could have made use, we talked about the utility of a piece of canvas, and you had mentioned that you had the redundancy of a piece of canvas and the tarp you wrapped the bundle in.
Right. So I, for years, I've carried this piece of canvas that's kind of part of my bedroll in cooler weather. But in fact, the piece of canvas that I wrapped all of my stuff in, the pack with the quilts and the portmanteau and the tentage, and all of that was wrapped up on top of the sled with a piece of canvas. And while we were there, it sat outside and got snowed on, where I really could have used that piece of canvas to put over my bedroll, ergo duplication of things. Really important to think about. You need to take enough, just don't take too much.
Yes, and that's a good note to leave you with. I want to thank Todd for coming down. Thank you so much,
Thank
Todd.
you, Wade.
It's always a pleasure. And we'll be in touch with you all, and hopefully we'll see you somewhere on the trail.
Absolutely.
You can visit us on the web, on our Facebook page for members only, or if you're interested in us, you can visit us at coht.org. That's www.coht.org.